Alexander Slavros, who founded the site Iron March, which has since mysteriously shut down. Why was it shut down? What happened to Slavros? On this episode of Doomed with Matt Binder, we're talking to Michael Edison Hayden, senior investigative reporter with the Southern Poverty Law Center, to find out. Let's get right to it. Let's pull you up here and...
Fun for me.
Oh, it's a lot of fun for me too, and I appreciate you dealing with my... we're running a little bit late here on the show. I was getting things together, you know.
I had to put my kids to bed too, so it's both, you know, it's both of us. And hopefully they don't wake up because we're going to have a short.
Right, that's what was happening here as well. Now, Michael, before we get to the main topic of today's show, which is honestly extremely captivating, I'm really excited to talk about it. You were telling me about something else that happened this week with a guy. Yeah, you should definitely.
I mean, Jared Holt would be better. As I said, would be better telling this story because he kind of wrote about it for Columbia Journalism Review. But there's this guy who I knew for so long as Progdad, who's this really amazing, very talented troll, Twitter troll, who used to like spoof and pretend he was like some kind of progressive person, whatever, like a character or whatever, and get outraged, make fun of outrage culture and whatever else. And he returned to Twitter under his own name, which is Owen Lenihan, and he was kind of like, it's difficult to know exactly to what degree he was masquerading as a researcher, an extremism researcher or whatever, but he published this Twitter thread that was all about like connections between people who are like, you know, blue checks, everybody's worst nightmare, and like Antifa, and put like me and a few other people on the list, which is quite fun. I mean, like I could care less about being called Antifa, but it was amusing because like Daily Caller and all these publications kept citing this guy, and like today, one of his credentials just came back and was like totally disavowed. Like we have no association with this guy. I want nothing to do with him. He's totally discredited, or whatever. So it was just very funny. I think you should get the full story from somebody who covered it, rather than somebody who's living in the articles, which include like these weird like chopped and screwed DM screenshots of mine with Progdad.
Oh, I will. You were just telling me about it before. I actually read the article by from Jared, and it was very interesting. But I totally the pseudonym you ran by me. I was like, wait a minute, what?
Yeah.
I just had to hear it.
No, most of these trolls, once they're gone from Twitter, they're forgotten. They need the oxygen to exist.
Right. Well, without Twitter, they sort of lose their place in the in the conversation in the simplest terms. This, you know, on Facebook, Milo Yiannopoulos, for example, had like over 1 million Facebook likes, people liking his stuff. Yet for some reason, no one of any notoriety was talking about him once he lost his Twitter account.
Yeah, and if you see like, I mean, the whole like, does deplatforming work? Of course it works. It works extremely well. Like, all you need to do is go to Gab now, which is a wasteland of, you know, psychopaths and whatever else, and go check out Milo's, if it's Milo, I think, his feed on Gab.
You could truthfully call him whatever you'd like, and I'd be fine with
it. but like, you know, he's doing kind of like really so numbers, you know, just in terms of interactions, and his posts on Gab are just it's like depressing to look at a guy like still trying, you know, to do this when he's got no audience, and it's just really pathetic. The posts are really pathetic, and most are just whining about deplatforming, and that's what happens. They don't have anything else. It's like, you look at that dude. Do you remember Nick Monroe? You were probably like busy when Nick Monroe got suspended.
I'm familiar with who he is, but I'm not. He got suspended?
Yeah,
Oh wait, I know who you're talking about. Yes, no, I remember him getting suspended. Right.
There's a whole bunch of. I'm sure there's a whole bunch of writers that I know would like to me to talk about like WADs, which is my term for like people who are not like fascists and Nazis and whatever, but they're just like these people who kind of just hover in both sides Nazis.
Right.
And like I have like a WAD ranking with like Tim Pool is like number one. He's like number one, and then like Tracy is number two. Anyway, Monroe is number three until he got suspended from until he got suspended from Twitter.
Tim,
and if you look at he's
Tim
on like
Pool. Man, Tim Pool. Oh.
He is he's quite a guy. I think like Tim Pool is like knows that he's kind of like a grifter. Like he's just sort of like, here's this stuff you want this, and he didn't. That's why he's so insincere now. He's just like yelling at the screen, just reading an article and just yelling at the screen.
Oh, for sure. He is. It's almost like you go to his YouTube and it's like, how is anyone believing that this guy is anything but a conservative? It's every single thing is something about the culture wars, something about how the left has gone to war against this, and then he'll say something like, but I'm not a conservative because I think that gay people shouldn't be sent to the concentration camps. It's like, what? It's like, are you kidding me, buddy?
But it's like, I don't know if I believe anything he says. Like, he just seems like he's got like, this is his job, and like he's gonna milk these like honklers and groypers for as much cash as he can get out of them, and then he'll move on to the next grifter. I think if he thought, going against, so it's like I think it's easiest grift to like go against, just neoliberalism in the most straight fashion, which is just the opposite of like what everybody's talking about, what everybody agrees on, because like a lot of the pundits are, the mainstream pundits are pretty fatuous and whatever. So all you do is just flip it and expose that, how silly that is, and then just go for the conservative angle, even if it's dead wrong, even if it's insane, and you will get, it's easy money, basically.
Right.
It's a free house. I don't know if I had everything.
No. Like, we're going a little bit, off. Right. But there's honestly so much we could talk about. The point I think I need to make here is that it's been like 6 months since I had you on, I believe, and clearly that was a mistake. You need to be on this program probably every week. But
sure.
if not every week, then we should do it more often.
For sure. Yes, we should.
So let's get to this story, because this is why I wanted you on the show. This specific instance, because this story you wrote a few weeks ago. In fact, I had messaged you and I told you that I read this literally days before. I think you published it days before my daughter was born, and I wanted to have you on like that following week. And that didn't happen because my daughter was born and everything got pushed back.
Yeah.
But so I'm reading the story and I'm like, I remember hearing about Iron March, and then it completely disappeared and just stopped hearing about it. But I never really heard much about this guy who was behind it. Yeah. And in this story you wrote for Southern Poverty Law Center's Hatewatch site, you really go into, and shockingly to me that I was unfamiliar, well, maybe not shockingly, but what was interesting to me, because I didn't know about it previously, was specific instances that showcase just how influential this guy and his site was to people who went out and committed acts of violence. And
that's true.
We laugh at some of these neo-Nazis who go out there like, I don't know, like Matthew Heinbach or whatever the hell his name is, who gets caught in like a menage a trois with his stepdad's girlfriend or something. And really, like, they're dangerous in some ways, but at the end of
they called it.
Right. But at the end of the day, he sort of is a joke. And
well, I mean, what I would say about the Heinbach thing is there was domestic violence involved, so I I'm both. Right. I find some of it kind of laughable, and the other part of it like extremely sad and whatever else. But yeah, you're right. Like, I mean, I think in some ways, it's beneficial for the left to be focused on guys who are quite silly and not amplifying stuff like Slavros, which is the reason why we do it. Is we do it like sort of post-mortem about what happened. If more people knew, and I would say that like, I think everybody, including SPLC, was behind. I mean, I wasn't at them at that time on how important Iron March was while it was up. Everybody was focused on, okay, look at this Richard Spencer thing is happening, whatever. And I think the most important thing to get across, and we'll go through the story of this guy in a second, is that after Charlottesville, you know, a whole bunch of activists and reporters like really went in on these guys and did a number on them in the sense of that they have just their ability to organize in a public space is just done. They can't do it. In March of 2018, Richard Spencer had his Michigan State rally, small, sparsely attended. Afterwards, the Traditionalist Worker Party blew up. At the same time, then Richard Spencer had his extremely embarrassing moment on a live stream where he's like, Antifa is winning, and which has been turned into a kind of a meme against him or whatever.
Right.
And what you have is like this is a time in which an undercurrent of what was happening at that time became bigger and bigger, and that is siege culture. And siege culture comes from Iron March. So these guys hated the alt-right. They thought they were a bunch of grifters, and it's sort of like hovering underneath the surface while the alt-right is going along and they're making progress. They're trying to win electoral things, and they've got people who are pushing Trump, and for whatever reason, whoever's paying them and whatever else, Trump is going along. But underneath there are these guys who are saying, the answer is violence. We need to destabilize Western countries. There's like a million times more serious. Not million, whatever. They are much more serious. They are not in it for the lulls. They're not in it to be famous. They don't want to be e-celebs. Iron March was not about, making people famous. It was about turning the Western civilization fascist and using violent tactics to get there. And what has happened now, as the alt-right has kind of broken apart, and we're sort of seeing, that chapter actually come to an end in some ways. It's just, it's been a slow move. This siege culture is rising, and you see it in the terror attacks that have happened. And the story of Iron March, for me, to end this introduction, is really the story of how this much darker vision of fascism really became, it won out in the court of their ideas. It was the thing that, everything that they said about the alt-right on Iron March, they were so critical, turned out to be true. And we can get into it from there.
All right, cool. Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing to me is, like you said, we covered sort of post-mortem because it's different than certain other sections of the alt-right and the far-right and, even open neo-Nazis and white supremacists.
Yeah.
But it seems like these guys, I don't even know if comparing them to Stormfront is even accurate, because it seems like these ones were even, the Iron Watch folks were even more, I don't know if the real deal is accurate to describe them as, whereas the Stormfront, I don't even know what I'm trying to say here.
Well, the first thing is Stormfront is famous for like boomer aesthetics, like it's like really dated, and it's kind of look, there someone from Stormfront could go and kill somebody tomorrow. That's a reality with any one of these websites. But Iron March was about being kind of they were the ones who were coming up with all of the propaganda and the imagery that has had staying power. The skull masks, the what they call now terror wave, which is like these cyberpunk aesthetics that, like, I will be quite frank, sometimes look kind of cool. Like if you like cyberpunk stuff and goth stuff and whatever, it's striking. The images are stark, dark, reminds you of black metal album covers, things like that. And they were really that was Slavros. He was on DeviantArt. That's what a lot of people don't realize. He used to radicalize people on DeviantArt, and with his, he used to post his propagandistic pictures, and like they were all like stuff involving there's one that is really amazing that I posted inside that story, which is of like Richard Spencer with like a noose around his head. and it's like, you know, surreal, whatever, don't call themselves goys or whatever. It was just like the whole idea that like, you know, that these guys are operating from this whole like, oh, you know, we're goys, we're like assuming Jewish power. Like, I don't know. It's more that they're just separate from all that and ready to, yeah, I think he called yellow fash. That's what he called Spencer. Yellow fash. Like, yeah.
No, but I think you're hitting the nail on the head, because I was sort of grasping for the right way to put it, because what I don't want to do is downplay a site like Stormfront. But
yeah.
at the same time,
you're not.
Right, but
you're trying to explain it, yeah.
Right, thank you. But you did it much better than I was trying to go at. But what I'm trying to say is that if you think Stormfront is dangerous, even with their like foolishness undertones, like their foolish undertones with their memes and their sort of things where you can take them unserious, Ironwatch is like the level above all that. It's like where the real deal guys who were not only true believers but knew what to do to not make the cause look like a joke like so many of these other groups do. These are the guys who knew how to promote the stuff. These guys were the sort of the operators, the better strategists, the ones who knew how to perpetuate this stuff, and as you just mentioned with a number of examples, influence the whole movement.
Yeah, they were like, everybody wanted to be okay with them because they were the most serious ones. These were like the coolest of the, you know what I mean? This is like the real hipster group of the kind of fascists starting from the Obama era. So like, I'll just get into like the sort of the story of it. So Slavros, here's what we know about him. There's a guy who is living in a wealthy neighborhood in Russia. The wealthy neighborhood is important in Moscow, whose name is Alexander Makhidinov. If I'm mispronouncing that and there's any Russian people or he himself is listening to it, I'm sorry. And he registers, he's a member of another fascist forum and also registers his own domain, which is slavros.org, in February 2011. In that, he's hyping up what becomes Iron March and posting a lot of his images and posting a lot of the things that we know he believes in, which is no compromise. He used to write a lot of essays with the words no compromise, talking about truth with a capital T. Truth being, fascism in its purest sense. It's like the hard stuff. He founds the forum shortly after, so we know that guy almost certainly is Slavros. We've seen pictures of him. He starts the site, and the first thing he does is set out rules of how people should talk and what they should talk about. And he wants subcategories. He wants people to talk about Breivik, the terrorist in Norway who killed 77 people in 2011. And he wants to talk about Golden Dawn. This is like very serious stuff. This is not like, yeah, let's Pepe it. This is like we want to be on the streets. We want to be, we want to take over the streets, take over these countries, and really talk the talk. He as well as Gabriel Shaput, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly too, who's Zeiger, who also wrote for Daily Stormer, start publishing a lot of essays to the site. Also know that sometime between its run from 2011 until 2017, that someone, and Slavros would have had to approve this, uploaded a lot of bomb-making instructions onto the site. To give you an idea of why this is not a joke. This is the real deal. What happens over this time is, it's a slow kind of drag where he's just picking up people who have really hard fascist ideas. They have to introduce themselves. They have to talk about how they got there, and et cetera, et cetera. And they kind of build up the site to 1,600 something forum users, regular forum users. The most active one is Slavros. And they're building organizations. They're building up organizations through there. Some of them are new. Some of them are old. There are 9 different fascist neo-Nazi groups across 9 countries. The most famous of those groups, which was kind of spawned in part on Iron March, is Atomwaffen Division, who a lot of people know. Had 5 murders since 2017. We know all the aesthetics of Atomwaffen Division with the skull masks and everything else. And while that site is humming along, there are some murders down in Florida involving Atomwaffen Division members who are also posting on Iron March. And there are, prior to that, a couple of terror attacks. One, NA in the UK, somebody dude attacks a guy with I believe it's I have to read my notes again. It's like a hammer or something, a claw hammer or something. Right. An immigrant, and there's another group in Scandinavia who plants a bomb at a refugee center or something. And
right, they attacked a British neo-Nazi group, National Action, had attacked a Sikh man with a claw hammer and a machete.
There you go.
Jeez.
Thank you. So what happens is then we get to, I believe it's May or June of 2017 when these murders take place in these Atomwaffen Division in this house where all these people who are Iron March people live, and Brandon Russell, who is in that house, is kind of was building bombs there to theoretically blow up power lines and churches and whatever else. He had some very serious plans, and about 5 months after that, the site disappears, and Slavros disappears from the web, and he's just gone without a trace. And that's kind of what the bulk of my story is about, is just finding who he was, but patching him together. We have an amazing thing, which is, I guess after the murders, we ordered the scrape of Iron March. And so we have a free floating thing that I could search through, and I've read maybe 150,000 posts. And if you ever read a scrape website, it's a really amazing experience. If you're kind of into internet nerd stuff, because it's going through a time capsule, kind of.
Right.
You just to imagine just walking through a site frozen in time where people can't interact with anything anymore and anything else. If you could somehow just freeze Twitter or something like that up until 2016, and that even old posts, no one could like it or post anything new, and just the website stopped, and you're just looking through stuff. It's kind of like that. It's a really amazing experience just to see these conversations. Some of the people who are dead, many of them are dead or in jail, and it's just to see what they're talking about, and even the small things they're talking about. It's really amazing kind of experience. And I don't know if it comes across on the page as much as I'm very proud of the story, but it was very difficult for me to articulate how eerie and fascinating it was to just crawl through that forum frozen in time.
Now, one of the interesting things to me about Iron March is that just how long it was around for, I guess, when compared to, I think most people jump into everything and in the past few years since, basically the 2016 election, they're like, whoa, where did this all come from? And it's these sort of people have been around for a very long time, but even the modern version that we're talking about, the alt-right, the more, you brought up the hipster neo-Nazis of Iron March.
Yeah.
This is not something that came out from Trump.
Slavros himself, I don't think people realize how dangerous the accelerationist wing of this movement is. And I think for your audience, which is, more left progressive or whatever, may not be fully aware, Nazis are bad and they blow up things or they try to kill people or whatever else. It may not be clear to people what the accelerationist wing really believes. And, following Iron March very closely, it'll leave you cold, because these guys won the argument in some ways. And they were around during the Obama years. And Slavros thought Trump was a cuck, and he had nothing. He liked nothing about him. And on the day of Charlottesville, because that's always my favorite thing to go, is the news events that I knew would trigger a response on the forum. So like Charlottesville is happening that Friday night, and actually SPLC's Twitter account, it was like 2017. I was in the ABC News newsroom, and I was seeing all those images of the Torch March and everything else, and to see these guys in there. Now some guys saying like, "Hey, we need to get in there and support this stuff," and Slavros was yelling, "Read Siege" in that room. And Siege is a book by James Mason, who is a neo-Nazi who wrote it over a length of time in the 80s. And what's interesting about that is it is way before Read Siege became a meme. And it was when all their people would have been defending Charlottesville, that he was talking about Siege, which is a book that advocates terrorism, and making fun of Charlottesville is quite amazing. It shows you that, there's how much disagreement, and also how much diversity of thought was really in this stuff. I mean, these guys really want to build a country for all whites. This is no joke. They're not LARPing.
Now, I think one of the issues I'm just occurred to me is that, we're familiar with this, but I think for people who may not be, what exactly, and what can you tell us a little bit more about Siege?
Yeah. Oh man. So.
In fact, I myself am so familiar with just hearing about this book and how it's basically been so influential to these movements. I don't even know if I know the whole story that you're about to tell me. It's one of those things where you're like, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, and then it just hit me now that we should probably go a little bit more into that if we can.
Sure. So, like a short thing on Siege is there is a neo-Nazi named James Mason who is somewhat obscure, and he writes a series of kind of like articles, essays, or whatever during the 80s. A guy named Moynihan, who is also responsible for that like black metal book that was based on that movie with Culkin, whatever. I don't know.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So he actually helps, put Siege together as a book, kind of as an esoteric collector or whatever. Siege it goes from total obscurity in the movement, relative obscurity, to becoming, the biggest touchstone that exists. And it's largely because of Slavros, who we hear him on a podcast. He used to do this thing called Fascism 101 with his Eastern European accent, and he says that we're going to push this book. And it's like around 2015 or so, and he says we're going to push the book. And sure enough, what we see, we did some data research, and we see the term siege go up on Iron March in our scrape, just the usage, where 2017 it goes up like this, right? And it keeps going up, siege. He pushed it just from him producing his propaganda and talking to the people on the forum, pushing it. And now you get, it's so ubiquitous that it's everywhere in Siege, just so we can get so listeners can get an understanding of what's in the book. It's very repetitious. I found it to be a very irritating read because of how repetitious it is. But sometimes you have to read these things from their point of view, and there's a lot of all caps and a lot of talk about the system and how the system is oppressing you and how we have to destroy it through acts of terrorism. And the idea is we're going to disrupt, the system, disrupt civilization as we know it, and then build an entirely new country for all whites in Western nations. But that can't be done unless we stir up the system. It'll never be achieved. You'll never get an ethno-state by voting it. You'll never be able to deport all these people. And in fact, they make more sense in some ways, that their idea of chaos or whatever else is the only way to achieve that goal, because they know that the system won't allow it. otherwise. So this book that advocates terrorism becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. And of course, people on Iron March start doing terrorism. And now Siege is ubiquitous, and you can't go into one of these rooms or whatever without somebody yelling "Read Siege" or online yelling it, type and send. But it is a battle cry, and it's sort of the implicit message is that "Read Siege" means it's almost like wake up or get woke, where you're no longer living in some reality where you think that you're going to be able to vote the immigrants out of the country, or you're going to be able to, vote the black people out of the country, or you're going to, the Jews are going to leave on their own and go back to Israel, or go back to Israel. They're from America, but go to Israel. They know when it's like a level of like almost like where there's like levels of being woke, where you're aware of like, okay, the cops do this or this, whatever. This is like, Reed Siege is like a plateau for people. It's like a place where you are now no longer like in belief that the system is on your side. And that the only way to do this is through real radical action, which involves preparing for your mass shooting or preparing for your bombing.
Now the guy who wrote this book, James Mason.
Yeah.
He, if I remember correctly, he's the guy who he was like retired retired from his neo-Nazi public figure role.
They never really retire, but yeah. He
had like sort of gone into stopped publishing, stopped writing or whatever, stopped advocating publicly, and then the popularity from Siege, from Iron March, and Slavros sort of brought him back into the fold. Is this
there is some definite truth to that. It's kind of like, oh God, this is a terrible comparison, but why not? Let's just throw it out there. I was going to say it's like, much more positive figures like Bernie Sanders or Corbyn, who have much more widespread appeal, whose beliefs in the days of like kind of like third way liberalism, they were considered goofy outcasts and were not taken seriously. And then suddenly the times changed and their ideas became more acceptable to people, and the demand for Sanders and not like caring what he looked like, whatever, were great. Whereas like somebody like Mason, would have seemed silly in 2014 when the kind of like the alt-right podcasts were first beginning and things like that. A few years later, now all of a sudden this guy who could have been embarrassing for just how his all caps and his desire to destroy the system suddenly started to make sense to people because they tried other things and they got excited by more radical action. We also just see general people getting more radical in their politics, while I would say the status quo remains very much as same as it ever was with Trump or anything else.
Right. Now, Iron March is no longer a website. Do we know? I know there's a mystery around this. Do we know exactly what happened to the Iron March website?
So we actually have no idea. But this is, and one thing that's annoying is SPLC, we have the only scrape of this website as far as I know, and which is really cool.
What kind of this was like a forum, so like what kind was it? More like not like an image board like 4chan. It was like an actual forum where people registered a username and became known under their alias. They weren't anonymous. Well, I mean, they were anonymous in terms of you didn't know who they were, but like, if I went by Johnny Nitro on Twitter, you would know I was Johnny Nitro, even though you didn't know my real name. Yes, it was like that.
But the quality, the quality of, yes, it would not be anonymous like 8chan or 4chan. This is but the quality of writing here was just substantially greater than you'd get in everything else, and the seriousness of which they would sit down and write things. Actually, I mean, there's some stupid writing, of course. It's all very pretentious. That's another thing I have to add. However, I mean, they were very serious, and they wanted to be taken seriously, and they wanted each other to take each other seriously, and they would debate. And that was the big thing, is that through these debates, they would get hardened to fascism and get more and more intense and more serious about it and less bullshit. And if there were something similar for the left, I really think a lot of people would be in a lot of trouble, just in terms of how organized people could be. Because you see the way they debated is actually the left could learn something from Iron March in that respect. You certainly can't learn anything from the violence, so that's not what I'm saying. But they could certainly learn from how, it's just like no irony, and it was all about how to advance their propaganda and their cause, which is of course basically satanic and evil. So here's what happens to this website. So terror attacks go down, and the murders take place, and it's coasting along for a few months. SPLC kind of scrapes it in 2017, September 2017. Then 2 months later, it just disappears. And we don't have those 2 months, what happened right before it. So what we do know is that there's a podcast. Andrew Ornheimer from Daily Stormer, who does the technical stuff of Daily Stormer, had a podcast called Race Ghost Roast to Roast, I believe it was called.
Oh my God.
It is. I learned so many things from it, because Weave is actually pretty smart and has a lot of interesting stories to tell, but is a complete he's they're all shock stuff about murder and him dropping slurs and whatever else.
Well, that's a perfect. The name of his podcast is a perfect example of what we were just talking about earlier, about how Daily Stormer and those other sites are there are things there that made them a mockery. Yeah. And how I don't think that podcast would have kicked off well on the very serious hipster website that was Iron.
So Weave seems like a kind of a backseat admirer of Iron March, and when the website went down at the end of November, he had Gabriel Schaput, who is the guy who wrote for Daily Stormer and for Iron March, and wrote essays for Iron March, and they talked, and it seems like Zeiger would know more than anybody else. Said it disappeared in the dead of night, and they're talking about how Slavros lived with his family and the different ways he could have been pressured by the Russian government, but somehow thing just was online and it wasn't. And several months later, a website called Fascist Forge popped up, and that is online now. I haven't seen it online today. Anyway, our researchers would know. I was about to check, but sometimes it's gone offline and gone back online, and it is built exactly like Iron March, and it's got all of Slavros's essays on it. It's continuing the tradition, and you have to answer these 25 essay questions or something to get access to the site. It's not something that Anyway, we won't talk about it.
It's like a VIP club for fascists. It's members only, like a clubhouse for neo-Nazis.
Yeah. There's a guy who's running it who goes by Matthias or something like that. And if you told me that Slavros was Matthias, I might say maybe, but I'm not sure about that. The writing style, I don't really know. For all we know, Slavros was online one day and doing this. And people were really into it, and a lot of violence was coming out of it, and then it went away.
Right.
One example of go ahead. Yeah.
No, but you know what? Continue. I don't want to lose that train of thought there with the example you're about to give, and then I'll get to the next.
I got a great one, which is that So, are you familiar with the Halifax? You may have read it, the Halifax, the Valentine's Day Massacre plot.
I probably did, but it's not ringing a bell right now.
Okay, so there's a woman named Lindsay Souvannarath who, in 2015, plots with two. She's from the U.S. Plots with two somewhere in the Midwest. I can't remember right now. Plots with two men from Canada. She's going to go up to a shopping mall in Halifax and open fire Columbine style and kill everybody in the food court and just go through the mall and kill everybody she can. Really intense, right? So she was busted before by Canadian police before she could pull this off. And one of her partners, who was her kind of over the internet boyfriend, commits suicide before he could be apprehended. And really scary about how many people could have been killed. She was a Columbiner, which is a kind of like, apparently some kind of internet cross section of like people who are obsessed with Columbine and like whatever. And she thought that one of the Columbine killers, I can't remember which one, was speaking through her and was speaking in her head and all this stuff. A lot of people don't realize that's an Iron March situation, actually, because Lindsay was on that forum under the name "With Hate Is My Sword." So her over the internet boyfriend was Slavros at first, not the guy who killed himself. That was her second over the internet boyfriend.
Right. No, the guy who founded Iron March.
Yeah. So he didn't kill himself. So basically, around the early start of the site, she's in high school and she really into kind of these kind of like edgelord like looks with like the skull mask and kind of industrial goth kind of looks and stuff like that. And she's on DeviantArt and was really into Slavros's art, and she basically was kind of taken in by him. He would be like, "You like this art? You might also like purifying the earth of of all the film, basically."
Wow.
And so
love story of the ages there,
Yeah. So he, and I don't think, and my guess is she's not the only one. He radicalized her to neo-Nazism, and she gets on Iron Marches with Hate Is My Sword. They kind of fall out of whatever. Her last post, she was at like Coe College in Iowa, and she was writing stories there. She was writing like these kind of horror stories, and she gets bored with it, and she starts to get more focused on the Columbine stuff. And then, 2 years later, she plots this Valentine's Day massacre, and she said that she was going to kill people who look dysgenic, and that's people with bad genes and whatever. And I think it really comes from, she talked on a podcast from prison called Nighttime Podcast. I highly recommend it to anybody. Go look up the Nighttime Podcast with Lindsay Souvannarath. She talks about it, all these things from jail, about how she became who she was and whatever. And there's just like this really, haunting thing where she talks about the idea like of being a mass shooter, and this, how there's no shame and you don't feel bad for the people you're killing because you're outside, you're seeing yourself outside of it, and it's all about the goal that you're trying to get, the thing that you're trying to do, the thing that you're trying to achieve. You step out of, this framework of every day, and you no longer see people as people, but you're focused on the statement and the thing. And that is really siege culture, because that is mass shooting is terrorism, and that's what a lot of these guys think. And that's why, Brenton Tarrant, the Christchurch mass shooter, whose propagandistic thing, one of my manifesto, really borrowed from Iron March language,
right?
And it was the same type thing. It was like, it was about like, this is the goal. Muslims were not people. It was just about making this political statement because the end goal was we're going to get eradicated from the earth. And what's scary is a lot of people believe that, and that is, to me, that culture that Slavros helped start becoming infectious.
Right. Now, Slavros. Now let's get back to him isn't correct, because this whole episode is really about him in one way or another. But let's
Yeah.
get to him specifically. Now, we don't really. You mentioned the registering of the website earlier on and the name on that.
Yeah.
We don't. Do we really know who Slavros is? Do we have a sense of who he is and where he is now?
So we don't know where he is. There are some people who say, "Oh, someone murdered him." The best theory I've heard, and one of the things about this that is so exciting is that this guy was there, he was posting every day, and then he just disappeared. And that is just a great story, especially considering hell he is unleashed. I mean, he's kind of like the Nazi version of Osama bin Laden in some ways. Not really, because obviously there's been nothing like 9/11 or something like that. But he is like a kind of he's really manipulated the dials like on our society in some ways.
Right.
A lot of this concern about far right terror in the way it's manifested recently comes from his ideas. So it's just fascinating that this guy was around and doing all this stuff, and then one day is just gone. So the best theory I've heard is he came from a rich family who were Russian or whatever else, or living in Russia, and they have a lot to lose. And daddy came in and found out about what he was doing, or someone informed him, and then was just like, absolutely not. No way. Stop it. And that was it. And just shut it down, and everything got shut down. It's a kind of a boring theory, but it's very interesting. And I think it would, if it were true, would be exciting to me in some ways. Because it shows just the power of a random thought on the internet, that just some guy who is just living with his parents can set the world into chaos, and it's just an amazing and quite scary thought. It's just like, wow,
Right.
He lives in Russia, and look at this, the Poway shooting. Who knows if that stuff is happening? The shooting in San Diego, where the guy goes into the synagogue, who's emulating the Christchurch. Who knows if that happens if it not for Slavros? But it probably would. Far-right terror has been happening all through. But this stylized approach, this propaganda, this stuff on 8chan, who knows? I mean, guy was some guy in his just his parents' house, just posting.
Now that theory, does it come from anywhere that has some sort of substance in terms of do they know that he comes from a moneyed family or anything like that, or is it just completely
There's a lot of hearsay. I would love to be able to go on the ground, and it's very difficult for me to just go off to Moscow and get on the ground and meet people or whatever. And a lot of people.
Do you speak the language?
No, and a lot of the folks from I couldn't get in touch with people who knew him or knew much about him from there, because this is it's one of the reasons to do the research and to provide the documents is because people have not done it yet. So we did our best with what we have, which is scrape and a lot of his old posts on DeviantArt and stuff like that. But there's reasons to believe he's from a wealthy address, and his parents had a lot to lose, and he clearly spoke, the English he spoke was really sharp, and that says something if you're Russian. It's like I lived in India for 5 years, where you can tell when somebody has that kind of high English, that really level of education, where there's you could make some associations. There's some class background,
right?
That you can hear, and if he has a lot to lose, then we can make I think we can figure that his family could have intervened and gotten involved. And one of the ways that his family could have gotten involved is the fact that the Russian government, Putin or whatever, was somebody pressured from our side was who knows how, State Department, who knows what might happen. And they're just do something about this. And they did. So, it's possible. What's interesting about Putin is, he has this impression where you got the people who got nutty about Russia. And, this idea that Putin is some kind of white nationalist, fascist, whatever. It's actually, no, Putin actually really doesn't like these guys. He really doesn't want them operating in this space at all. If if you want to call him a fascist or whatever, it's a different kind of thing.
Right.
He
He's
wants,
it's like an authoritarian, not
yeah,
a yeah.
But he's not he's not about he's not interested in their bullshit about preserving the white race, and he's interested in maintaining power and control. And these guys are interested in blowing shit up in his country and disrupting process. And as an authoritarian, he doesn't want them there. So they are rebels to him. Then there's a lot of reason to want to shut them down.
Right. Yeah, that's honestly, I think, an episode in and of itself. I think a lot of people are under that misconception that, Vladimir Putin is because there is sort of analogous actually to what we're seeing in America. It really does feel like if you were to take the countries where there's a rise, this white supremacism, neo-Nazi, these fascist movements are rising. It's the U.S. and Russia come to mind really as like the main two. Like I know, Europe has a few different countries there, a few different groups, but when it comes to like what we're seeing here, and I also feel like what we're seeing in Russia, it's
Italy is not great right now.
Right.
But I didn't continue.
Right. I was sort of thinking like, when I was thinking of the major sort of figures from each country, and I'm not familiar with all of them, but one that kept coming to my mind in terms of like who's like the Richard Spencer of, and I know these guys don't like Richard Spencer, but he's, whether they like him or not, he's definitely the face of this movement here in the U.S. I was thinking of, Tommy Robinson in the UK. But much like Spencer, though, like compared to these guys, he's a joke. Like I can't even compare him to Slavros.
He's an e-celeb. What I would say is the concerning thing is these guys kind of undergird that by being serious and being hardcore or whatever. These terror attacks benefit grifters, right-wing grifters like Tommy Robinson and stuff like that, because chaos and disruption, helps these, people who have authoritarian values, and it's a way, exactly as the Iron March folks draw it up, is through chaos you can slip new ideas in, poisonous new ideas, and it's like people will go with the status quo when they feel like things are normal and nice and whatever. One thing that is, talking about that is, you mentioned Trump. I think there's just absolutely no way in hell that, like, for all the things that people say, oh, Trump is this and he's, and there's a difference between casual racism and whatever else, and being against immigrants and whatever. There's a difference between that and this is like a very different thing. And I believe me, Trump will happily make a show against white nationalists. I'm surprised he hasn't done more, hasn't taken an opportunity to do more with 8chan or something like that, just to make a point, because I think it would poll well, and I think it would be, I think he's probably right now he's kind of tied to the whole free speech drum, right? So he doesn't want to be shutting things down. But I don't see why these guys hate Trump, and I don't understand why he hasn't been more aggressive in doing things about them, because I think it would benefit. It would help it distance himself from those accusations of racism or whatever else.
Right, well, we've seen there was a report today or in the past 24 hours. There was a report that basically said how he got bored of the coup in Venezuela. So, I mean, that's probably when it comes down to thinking about the thought process behind this guy. It's probably that A, he doesn't know about it, or B, it's boring to him. It's not entertaining. He wants to be golfing, man. Why are we taking him away from his buddy Tiger Woods? But listen, that's actually
I can't take off my expert hat right now and say everything I'd love to say about Trump, but like I will just say that, like, I mean, for some in some ways, I just feel like it's really a lot of Murphy's Law stuff, where it's like, or not, maybe that's not the term I'm looking for. Whatever it is, it's like the dumbest possible thing. That's what I really want to say is probably the truth with a lot of these things. It's like, he just doesn't, I feel like it's a really, he's not a guy who's organizing on any kind of real principle. There are some people pushing him in particular ways, and I think that, like, there are certainly some policies that, like, we've seen out of the Trump administration that should shock people, and should shock people who are anti-racist activists, of course, and like the stuff at the border, of course. All that stuff is horrifying. Also, under Obama, we did deport a lot of people, but like just horrible stuff like that. But also, in some ways, Trump is the kind of guy where if he felt like he wouldn't play, he would stop it immediately. All he cares about, I feel, is just being famous and staying on top. I don't know. Somehow that is just the way. That's what I get from him. I just think he's not that ideological, and then I feel like what he does that horrifies people in terms of ideology is stuff that he feels that he needs to do in order to sustain his popularity and his base.
Right. And I just want to get back to something you said earlier, because this is something that I try to really nail down on this show specifically. Because when you're just talking on Twitter or online somewhere with people or whatever. And, you're trying to explain basically, how far right the Republican Party has gone, how far right this administration is. And, it's easy to just say they operate like white supremacists, they operate like neo-Nazis. But I think you made the point that I try to make on the show that while you can paint all them with this broad brush where they probably do believe, even the mainstream Republicans probably do believe in some sense that, white people should be privileged and white people should have these step-ups in society. And you can say that type of stuff, but when you want to talk about these groups and the movement and really nail down the specifics, you have to point out that they're not all one and the same. And like what you said, Trump is a white supremacist, but he's not a white supremacist, if you understand what I'm getting at.
He's not politically organized in that way.
Right.
He says racist things and he has racist policies, but he doesn't. But he himself is not organized in that capacity. On that note, and it also we can tie this back to Slavros. I just did an extremist profile with a couple of my colleagues about Paul Nehlen. Do you remember Paul?
Oh, how can I forget the white supremacist who ran for Congress?
Right. Well, so there's a really interesting thing that ties all that Trump stuff together with...
Just to be more specific, because there's actually been a number of those. He's the guy who had a list of Jewish people out to get him.
Yeah, a list of Jews in the media. I was one of the Jews on the media that went out to get him. Did
Congratulations, my friend.
I didn't know I was Jewish. I'm perfectly okay with it.
Listen, to be on one of those lists, I'd wear it as a badge of pride, man.
I went to high school in Long Island, so I feel like I can get it when I if I want to be Jewish, I can kind of it's just a few inches over. And,
a number of
it was so weird. But then I was told, someone explained it to me, oh, your mother is Egyptian, so you're Semitic, so you're Jewish.
Oh, that's okay. Really. See,
probably interesting to a lot of people in Egypt to learn that as well.
Right. So in my case, my dad's Jewish, and so very Jewish. So we're I wasn't raised religiously Jewish, but in terms of nationality, I'm Jewish. But but when people ask, it's I'm not religiously Jewish. I was actually raised as a Catholic. But I'm Jewish enough where even if I did have these thoughts, I couldn't join the KKK or anything. They wouldn't probably allow me.
well, Daily Stormer took Weave, and he's Jewish.
Weave is Jewish, right? I forgot about that.
Yeah, well, he's at least. He's probably, I don't know how much or how little. I mean, but his family is.
I guess they allow some of them, right? I guess they got to take what they can get in this.
No, he's got some problems in the movement. But here's the deal so this is cool because you can actually if I feel it's sort of disingenuous to tie Trump to accelerationism, but there's two ways to do it. The first way is to note that he opened up a can of just a generic thing that broadly Trump opened up a whole can of worms when he ran on this kind of populist anti-immigrant thing and kicked up white supremacy out in the open in a way we've never seen. So it's unsurprising that very extreme versions have reared their head. So you can sort of tie him to that, but the better one is the Paul Nehlen thing, because Paul started as a MAGA guy and did this hilarious, I would highly recommend everyone check it out, go see his early campaign thing where he's pulls up in a motorcycle, he's oh, Paul Nehlen, and I want to get things done, whatever. And it's he's riding a motorbike. It's this really cheesy local Wisconsin ad. And he was supposed to take on Paul Ryan in 2016.
Right.
So He's backed by Steve Bannon. Palin endorses. He's on Lou Dobbs. He's on Laura Ingraham, of course. He's on and Coulter, I think, campaigned for him. That's right. And Trump himself, in short of endorsing him, said to the Washington Post, this guy's doing big things, or something like that. That's not the exact quote, but it was something positive, and said, "Thank you for your support, Paul Nehlen," on Twitter. You can still find that tweet. So 2017 comes around. He loses to Paul Ryan, only gets 15% of the vote. Towards the end, he starts to go off the rails, starts saying that we need to start, deporting Muslims. Basically, if you're a Muslim, we need to think about probably getting rid of you. So we get a little taste of where he's going. So 2017, he goes to campaigns for Roy Moore, and he appears on Fash the Nation, which is an alt-right podcast hosted by two guys whose identity is still unknown for now. I should just say for now.
Oh, we gotta do it. If I had a breaking news sound effect.
No. Keep it down for now. But we, he appears on the show to kind of pump his thing, and he, it's an alt-right podcast. It's an anti-Semitic podcast. It's all about, it's all the Nazi stuff, basically. For that, it's not neo-Nazi. It's white nationalist.
To be fair to Nehlen, is he aware that the show titled "Fash the Nation" is indeed those things? I'm just trying to make sure. I want to be fair.
So Nehlen, basically, in my opinion, by doing that show, revealed himself to be a person who listened to Fash the Nation. So he was being. So it's very clear that this guy was. I think. I can't remember whether it was Richard Spencer. Somebody said he took too many red pills, because he did Fash the Nation, then Chris Mathias of HuffPo kind of reported that, I think, and then he started to get into it on Twitter with somebody, and I was at Newsweek at the time, and Ari Cohn who was from some nonprofit, and he called him Ari Cohn with triple parentheses on the outside, and so I wrote about that. And then he started to push Culture of Critique, the Kevin McDonald book, which is really popular with neo-Nazis and white nationalists, and blah, blah, blah. Then Nehlen put list of Jews and got suspended from Twitter. And for many people who were interested in the Paul Nehlen story, that's where it ended. There was this guy. He was a MAGA guy. He went off the deep end. He took too many red pills, and that's it.
But that is not the story.
No, that is not the story because Paul Nehlen has a Telegram group where he calls himself Uncle Paul, and all he does is post pictures of mass shooters as saints, and he gives a new hit list of Jews in the media, and talks about reading Siege, and he talks about he's producing an audio book of Siege.
Nice.
And he
wow.
He says we need to herald the arrival of the Poway shooter, and there's a great audio clip. I posted it on Twitter when we did the extremist profile, and he talks about breaking the Poway shooter out of prison. This is no joke now. This is not we're just doing Fash the Nation and whatever else, which is bad enough. This is he got infected. He got the brain worms from Slavros, wherever Slavros is, and he may not know that that's where it came from. And whoever he got it from, there's a podcast he appears on called Bullcast, which is based on the haircut of Dylan Roof wore. Those guys may not be.
Wow.
They may not be.
so it's expected now, but it's still, you think about it, it's is that really do you think that's clever? It's sort of. Even in your world where you think he's some sort of they call him a saint, I'm sure. That's really really.
I mean, he's Dylan Roof is a coward, and he went in and murdered innocent people who were nice to him.
Right.
And
absolutely.
And he is protected in prison, and if he were not protected in prison, he would be killed.
Absolutely.
Because he is but for them, he's a saint because they're really despicable, and many of them are also cowards, quite frankly. Who need to have to like get beyond. Like, okay, there's two sides of me. I've said some stuff about how interesting, from a research perspective, interesting, cool some of this stuff is, like, for a research perspective, and how fascinating it is. But like, morally or whatever, we're talking about these people are sick. Like, they've got problems. They've got serious problems. And I would say I wish them, I hope some of them get help. And for the ones that don't get help, I mean, I hope people are paying attention to them.
Without a doubt.
They don't get to do what they want to do, which is murder people.
Right. Now, to think these things, and you're sick to some level, definitely. But I also, and I don't want to hold you for too much longer. There's definitely different levels, though. Like, where we're talking like people who could be helped. We're talking about people who get caught up in this stuff because they're angry at the world or something. They've been fooled by the people who run these organizations. Someone like a Slavros or a Spencer, who are in it because they're the true believers. They're not the ones being fooled. These are the ones that are they're in it for their own reasons, and we're not showing any sort of there's no saving those people because they don't want to be saved, and they don't. Frankly, they enjoy what they do, sick as it sounds,
Yeah. I mean, it'd be interesting to see what somebody like Spencer does now that he's lost influence. Because for Spencer, he had his celebrity, and like, we don't know. I mean, we don't have innocent until proven guilty here and all this stuff. There were allegations of domestic violence that were waged by his wife or his ex-wife. I don't know where the status they are in those things. And in the allegations, she was like, he did a kind of like, do you know who I am kind of thing, which is so pathetic. It's like, who are you, dude? Like, you're Richard Spencer. And
right.
It's like, whatever. But like, with Spencer is very different from Slavros, and, to bring it back to that subject, which is, for Slavros, his essays were read and consumed by these guys, and he wanted to be read, and he wanted to be influential, but he didn't want to be like an e-celeb,
Right. And I think that's a good point, because that shows the difference between someone who is straight up, well, they do believe what they're saying, like a Robinson and a Spencer. It's also their grift. It's how they make money. It's how they want the fame. They enjoy that sort of stuff. Slavros seems to, just by him going by an anonymous name, a pseudonym, no one knows who he is. He's not looking for fame or celebrity. He's just looking to spread this ideology.
Yeah. Well, that's, to me, what makes a lot of siege culture much more dangerous, because the celebrity comes after you've done the crimes. Right. Whereas for these guys, like Spencer, I don't know where he goes after he loses influence and stuff like that. I don't know where some of these guys go when they don't have their audience anymore. They try to build an on-the-ground movement. I know stuff like that, like Mike Penovich from the Right Stuff Network, definitely, trying to build, some kind of on-the-ground, whatever, around his podcast. A lot of that is just, has... it's not ineffective. Like, they can get guys, but it's the question of how well it can sustain them. What concerns me about siege culture in general is, if your goal is to be loved by these people in these Telegram groups where a lot of this is going now, and on 8chan, that comes after you've shot up a bunch of people. And that's what's scary for me, because they get their moment then and after the act. And the sainthood thing is that they stay famous, they stay beloved by that community. And if that's the community you're trying to think, you can get the Richard Spencer feeling without the feeling of deflating in the public eye, which is, I really think, people like Spencer are doing and will do. I mean, who knows? Maybe Spencer will like Duke and he'll just keep going for a long time. But even Duke is like, needed to latch on to the alt-right to kind of stay relevant. It's these guys, on the other hand, once you embrace the idea that you're going to spend the rest of your life in prison, and the people you want to impress are on 8chan and on Telegram or in Fascist Forge or whatever else, and you want to be called a hero and you want to be called a saint by them, other people will pay the price, and it's a very different kind of thing. So it's a much more dangerous thing for me.
Right. Michael, thank you so much for joining us tonight. This is really, a fascinating story in terms of not just the usual, alt-right neo-Nazi group type stuff we talk about on this show, but it's like a mystery story. Who is this guy? Why exactly did the site go down? Is that theory, which would honestly take this to a whole new level, because we've seen these sites go, these far right extremist sites go down, but they usually go down because a web host didn't want them anymore. A domain registrar didn't want them anymore. They lost their funding. Some other group got pissed at them and made their followers turn against them. But if these theories are correct, something that is next level in terms of why one of these sites went down. So
we're doing one more in this series. I did the first story, which you read, which is about Iron March. It's great. We're doing one more on Zyger, who is on the run right now. He disappeared. So they put a warrant out for his arrest in 2018 for violating Canadian hate speech laws, I believe. I forgot what the exact thing, but they have a lot, different stuff. And he just vanished, and they think it's unlikely that he left the country. So he's somewhere in Canada, and it's going to be fun to go through his posts and his kind of ghost trail, because he's also disappeared, but for a different way. He's gone underground, and they don't talk about him in these forums, even these closed forums where they don't know that I'm listening to their conversation. He is really kept secret. It's an interesting guy. So maybe after that one, we can catch up again or something. But I have some good stories that hopefully I got a little bit of work to do to prove out some stuff. I got some good stuff coming this summer, I'm hoping.
Well, I would love to have you back on. And definitely sooner than another 6 months. Michael Edison Hayden, senior investigative reporter with the Southern Poverty Law Center. Check out his work at Hatewatch. Michael, do you want to name drop a website or your Twitter handle or anything like that?
My Twitter handle is at Michael E. Hayden.
All right, everybody. Michael, thank you for joining us tonight.
All right. It was awesome.
Talk to you soon.
Bye, Matt. Take it easy.
Bye. Doot. Skype goes goodbye. All right, ladies and gentlemen. I'm having that phantom, what is it, phantom phone? Whatever it's called, where you feel your phone vibrate in your pocket, but it's not vibrating, nor is the phone in your pocket. Anyway, there were a few technical difficulties at the very beginning of this program. I hope no one realized. I saw one or two people in the YouTube live stream mention it. I hope those are all fixed now. They should be. You might notice, if you're watching the YouTube live stream, that I'm in a dark room, a very dark room. But I'm not actually in a dark room. Where I am actually is right where I always am, in front of a green screen. Look at that. You can all see that. Now, I'm still messing around with the lighting I got here. I told you guys I got a new light. I had shown you guys this green screen, months and months and months ago. But, I've slowly been putting together the funds that you guys fund me with on Patreon, patreon.com/MattBinder, to build what I need to build up the finances I need to buy some of this stuff to upgrade the show. I tell you guys I'm going to do that, and I'm delivering. This money's not going straight into my pocket. It is going towards this show. So that's the green screen. You can all see it behind me. Again, you'll see shadows because I'm still fixing up the lighting. But I thought, hey, let's get it going today. Let's do this. And then there were some technical difficulties with the live stream, like I mentioned, but that should all be good. Now, you all might have heard that, I'll get to that in a second. Patreon.com/MattBinder. You could support the show there. I'll talk about my YouTube demonetization in 1 second. But first, I want to thank the people who make the show possible on Patreon. Because without them, you wouldn't be listening to me right now. And Patreon just signed me out, which is wonderful, because I wanted to do this in a hurry. Come on, Patreon. Come on. No, don't verify this device. No. What are you doing to me, Patreon? All right, well, anyway. Folks, you might have heard that I've been demonetized. I've got demonetized from YouTube after you probably all heard how long it took me just to get monetized. I don't know why I was demonetized. Truly, I don't. They didn't tell me in the email. They didn't tell me that my super chats, which are connected to monetization, were deactivated. So I wasn't making a ton of money off of YouTube advertising or even super chats. But, a little bit helps. So when something like that happens, what I can tell you is that since I've been monetized on YouTube, I've been covering about half of the podcast hosting fees each month. Again, that's not so much, but it's a little something. And YouTube is taking that away from me. But what could I do? I'm going to try to get monetized again. I'm going through the different processes I can get through. If that doesn't work, I have to wait 30 days from the day I was demonetized, which was Father's Day, by the way. Happy Father's Day to me. After 30 days, I can reapply, which takes another 30 days, if they even allow me to come back in. We'll see how it works. We'll see. I'm sure Dave Rubin and Tim Pool and Steven Crowder and all those right-wingers who cry YouTube censorship and are stalwart defenders of free speech are going to be emailing me at any moment to invite me on their shows to discuss. I also like to point out that I got demonetized just like 2 or 3 days after the last episode, which was a interview with two on-the-ground organizers of the counter-protest to the Straight Pride Parade March planned in Boston. Two members of the Boston Democratic Socialists. So, I don't know if it had anything to do with it. I don't think YouTube, personally, I made the joke on Twitter, but personally, from what I know, and to be as real as can be and not be like the fakers that are Tim Pool and Dave Rubin and Steven Crowder, YouTube did not demonetize me because they're against the left or left-wing ideology. What probably happened is, A, I probably got caught under some sort of filter because I was talking about white supremacists and neo-Nazis or who knows what. B, I was probably flagged by people for talking about that stuff. You all know that there's some haters who watch this show. Or B, just the politics content just doesn't play well with their advertisers, and because it got flagged for that, it got taken down. I highly doubt YouTube is out to stop me from talking to two organizers against the Straight Pride Parade March. But for the sake of the culture war, yes, I truly do believe that's why. Because they hate free speech and they want to suppress my voice. Maybe Tucker Carlson will have me on the show, says Renee. Right. Anyway, patreon.com/MattBinder. Help support the show. Help grow the show. Anything you can give, really. I ask for $5. If you give more, that'd be great. If you give less, that'd be great. The people who give, ladies and gentlemen, are making the show possible: Abigail T, Adam Q, Alan B, Amanda G, Andrew C, Andrew H. Appeal to... Wait, whoa. Hold on 1 second. I have to just go to the active patrons. For the people I just read who aren't active patrons, thank you for your support. You got an extra little shout out there, but I'm going to go to the active patrons, and they are Abigail T, Adam Q, Alan B, Andrew H, Benji, Bobby M, Brooke H, Champagne Kame, Champagne, I'm gonna call you, Champagne Kame, Chai, Christine Christine H, Colin R, Dakota R, Dan M, Dank Uger, Dave K, David H, Dragon Slayer, Floaties, Fraz K, Francis Zek, FTW All Day, Greg D, Ian Curtis J, Jameson Test, Janelle A, Jasmine H, Jeff K, Jonathan B, Joseph R, Katie S, Kyle, Lisa D, Max W, User Me, Michael J, Michael M, Mr. Dinks, Nicole A, Namde Net, Omid M, Romina O, Ryan Left His Best, Struggle Session, TM, Tammy G, Thaddeus A, Tina M, Tom G, Tom M, Trine E, next page, Will P. and Zarin. Once again, patreon.com/MattBinder. Really appreciate any support you can give. If you cannot financially support the show, that's okay too. You can help out by going to iTunes and leave leave whatever review you'd like. But if you really like the show, you should leave a 5-star review and a written review. That stuff helps. It helps people find the show when they're searching for politics podcasts and the like. You can also support this show by subscribing to the YouTube channel, right? The demonetized YouTube channel. But really, if I had more subscribers, YouTube would be less enthusiastic to demonetize me because I'd be making them more money. So youtube.com/MattBinder or doomed.tv, they both take you to the YouTube channel. Subscribe. It's a click of a button. And also click that little bell so you get notified when a new video or live stream goes up. Yeah. That's the show, folks. Another great way you can support the show is tell your favorite podcasts and YouTube channels to have me on the show. Or just tell them about the show. Tell them about Matt Binder. That's me. And I'll leave you on this. That stuff, as in telling people that you'd like to see me on their show, seems to have worked because I can tell you all that a week from tomorrow, Friday, June 28th, I will be in studio at the Majority Report with Sam Cedar as the Casual Friday guest. It's taken about close to 4 years since I left working at the show for me to be on the show. No, that's not true. It's been 2 years since I've last been on the show. A year and a half, I think, is actually more accurate. But I wasn't the main guest. I was the guest on after the first guest on that episode. As far as I know so far, unless Sam's going to pull something on me, I am the Casual Friday guest for next Friday. And I will be in studio. I don't know if Sam knows I'll be in studio. I believe he said on the show that he hopes I'll be in studio. The booking was based on a text. So we'll see. Maybe those plans will even change. But as of now, Casual Friday, June 28th, 12 noon, The Majority Report with Sam Cedar. Matt Binder. In studio. I'm coming back home. Folks, this is Doomed with Matt Binder. And I just messed up the ending because I have to repeat myself by saying, see you all next time on Doomed. Stick around for the member show if you're a Patreon subscriber. Patreon.com/MattBinder. All right. We're back. Whew. That was quite the episode. What I need after an episode like that is a palate cleanser. something to just wipe the taste of really some of it's amusing, some of it's fascinating, some of it's disgusting. Oh, all of it's disgusting. And nothing is a better palate cleanser to me than talking about the 2020 the Democratic primaries. What is going on? My God, yesterday, Bernie Sanders' Twitter account tweets about how Third Way, the centrist think tank, wants anyone but Sanders to win the primary. And people jumped on him because the article that he retweeted that quoted Third Way saying they wanted anyone but Bernie Sanders was angled in a way that centered how Third Way is even warming up to Elizabeth Warren if it means taking down Bernie Sanders. And so people attacked Bernie as if he was calling Elizabeth Warren a Third Way corporatist centrist. Come on. Just the bad faith reading on this is just unbelievable. If anything, Bernie Sanders has gone out of his way to, every time he mentions Elizabeth Warren, he says, I'm friends with Elizabeth Warren. My friend Elizabeth Warren. I don't think he said one negative thing, or not even negative. He hasn't said one critical thing. He hasn't said one single comparison in terms of him and her, period. I think the most he's gone in terms of critiquing her campaign is him simply saying that he believes that he and his campaign is the best to take on Donald Trump. I mean, come on. Come on. Also, this is a primary. Eventually, they're going to have to explain how they're different from one another. Come on. This is just getting... This is getting ridiculous. Ryan in the YouTube chat says, talking about the Hell World primary is a palate cleanser to you, Matt? That's concerning. Well, compared to the Nazis and the fascists, yes, it is. And also, when it comes to the primary stuff, a little bit of a masochist. I really enjoy it. I really enjoy it. Like the 2016 Hillary versus Bernie stuff. Oh, I miss it in a sense. Because you know why? The stakes, while in that moment, everyone's gets really hot and heated, and the stakes are high in terms of Hillary not being able to defeat Donald Trump. But in terms of, like, listen, like, when it comes down to it, the people we're arguing with online in the primaries, they're not the final boss. You know what I mean? They're not the big... If anything, maybe they're, like, the boss, the temporary villain that we end up befriending because we have similar interests in taking down the actual evil final boss. I can't think of an example right now. I'm drawing a blank. Would us being Sonic and them being Knuckles be an accurate portrayal? I can't recall Sonic and Knuckles' relationship. It would be like Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock teaming up to take down the corporate ministry. It would be something like that. Dude Love and Stone Cold Steve Austin, Mick Foley and Stone Cold Steve Austin teaming up to take down Degeneration X, or to take down Undertaker and Kane, or Triple H and Vince, or something of that nature. That's how I look at it. You guys understand what I'm saying here? Jeez. It's like here, let's talk a language that maybe more people will understand in 2019. It's like Daenerys Targaryen putting the fact that Jaime Lannister murdered her father aside because the Night King is on his way with the army of the undead. There you go. There you go. How's that? I can't give you... What I really want to give you is the Harry Potter example. But I've never read anything but the first Harry Potter book. So I'm not that plugged in to say anything more. Unlike the people who could only cite Harry Potter, I've read more than just that one book. So it would be like, I don't know, does this happen in the story? It would be like Harry Potter and Draco Malfoy teaming up to take down, what's his face? God, I can't remember his name. The noseless guy. He who we do not speak of, or whatever. I'm not a Harry Potter guy. I'm not a Potterhead, or whatever they call themselves. Voldemort, thank you. Dank Uger. That's the best I can give you. I just started Deadwood because I wanted to watch the movie. And in 2004, when the show came out, I was just starting college. I wasn't watching much TV then. So I'm just getting into Deadwood now. So an example of that would be Al Swearingen teaming up with Seth Bullock to make sure that that Deadwood's titles and deeds and everything are all squared up and no one from out of the camp is going to come in and take it all away from them. That's another one I can give you. Brother. Oh, brother. I'm gonna talk much more about the primaries and all that drama. What I'd like to do is, leading up to me being on the majority port, and hopefully to get back my monetization, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start doing those solo videos, like the quick news hits, like, you know, how a lot of other channels put up that don't do live streams. And I'm going to cover a few of those stories. Probably get one or two of them up, hopefully, before Friday. We'll let you know who my guest next week is going to be. I also sort of want to take full advantage of the majority port appearance and have a Doomed right after the majority port. Well, not right after. Like that night. So I could plug it on the show. Have a Friday night episode of Doomed. Get people to tune in who are majority port listeners. All right, let's go to the weird thing, by the way. I'm just noticing this now. Skype was the reason everything was lagging earlier. Because I was monitoring my computer's activity monitor to see the computer usage. And Skype's was just off the charts when I first started the show. And the second the interview was over and I closed Skype, it's like a huge difference. Well, it is what it is. Let's see. Let's open up the comments here. Can't believe you guys can't super chat me. Unbelievable. Taking away my monetization. Taking away what little I got. I think it's fair from me watching so much Deadwood. to liberally use this word. Those cocksuckers. If you haven't watched Deadwood, please watch Deadwood. I'm loving it. It's so good. And I can't get over how much they use that word. It's not even like... It's not even... I can't even describe to you. It's not even like, whoa, you're using this word too much. It's like literally like... They're using it as if it's I, he, she, cocksucker. I, he, she, you, it, cocksucker. It's like they could use any of those. They're all interchangeable. It's something else. I love it. Now, what I wonder is that like something they're going... I'm sure I could just look it up. The show has been on air for quite a while. Is this something that they've done liberally with the program in terms of just like they decided they want to have this be a thing on the show? Or did like something happen in the mid to late 1800s, at least in the West, in the frontier, the wild frontier, where did they really just use the word cocksucker like that? I wonder. Could be something to look into. All right, let's read these comments. Let's see what you guys are up to. Let's talk. Let's shoot the shit. We're running really late, but I'll give you guys, another 20, 30 minutes. We'll see. I give my patrons a full Patreon show. No matter, full show. You guys never, when I say we'll hurry it up, I mean we won't go the usual, 2.5, 3 hours I go. Misha says Dim Tool. Grim says reminds me too much of Dimmy Jor. Dimmy Boar, says Misha. What was that thing about Jimmy Dore I saw? Edited Sam. He had a guest on that mentioned progressive shows that he listened to. He was like a former alt-writer who listened to progressive shows and that helped him get out of the movement. And he name dropped TYT, Jimmy Dore, and Sam Cedar. And Jimmy Dore edited Sam Cedar's name out. Is that true? Daniel says Dimmy Dore is going to have dim car fascism on his show. Grim says Dimbo, the Stalinist anti-Antifa. Clear Singularity says Dim Rubin. Renee says Jamal's plugging Joe Rogan. Coincidence? Is Michael Brooks going to be on the Joe Rogan show? Is he? Or is that just a reference to him talking about Joe Rogan calling him Michael Roberts on his podcast? Ryan, talking about my green screen, says, whoa, Binder in space. Does it look like I'm in space? Choking on Ashes says, I keep losing the stream. That was earlier. That was what I was talking about, where some people were saying there were some technical difficulties. Ryan being sarcastic, saying, oh yeah, blue checks definitely love Antifa. Talking about, Michael earlier was talking about the, that story that, Jared from Right Wing Watch wrote up that our guest today mentioned about the list of pro Antifa blue check marks, which was not true, obviously. Daniel says the bourgeoisie is 99% astroturf of the time. Steve Bannon just uses those skeevy gold farmers from MMORPGs. Yeesh. Ryan says taking money from chuds is praxis. Daniel says false equivalency and selective detailing, aka lies of omission, are the core of right-wing agitprop. Yes. Kennedy says it's free real estate. Choking on Ashes says, I can't believe how lucky I am. After being very ill for 4 years in London, I now have a flat in Bristol and just been awarded disability benefits. Well, Chokin, I hope you're feeling better. And I'm glad to see things are looking up. And I hope they continue to go in your favor. And just get better and better and better. Samson says, how much money does Tim really make, though? Are you talking about Tim Pool? Renee says, now Milo sells his throne. Right, he's like selling all of his actual physical stuff. Grimm calls them trailer park traditionalists, as in, pretty sure mentioning like the Matthew Heimbikers. Right. Chokin says, I am worried about the Tories cutting even more benefits in the UK. There are so many homeless people due to austerity. Right. Samson says, cool, free association chat. LOL, bye. What did I miss there? But I guess Samson dropped out of the chat then. Chokin says, I am 52. The UK has changed so much from Thatcher to now. Right-wing government has killed communities. Right. I mean, I think you could say the same here in terms of Reagan. Samson says, this conversation could have definitely benefited from an introduction to Iron March at the beginning of the conversation for the uninitiated me. Oh, I see. My bad, Samson. We started it not talking about Iron March at first. And then I believe once we segued, though, to start talking about the main topic of the program, I believe I had my guest do a quick rundown of what Iron March was. If it wasn't enough, then my apologies, Samson. I'm sorry. Definitely a good critique, though, because we certainly needed that. My bad. Was anyone else lost at the beginning? Or did I make sure Michael do a good, quick, summarized rundown, at least at the very top? I know we got way more into it before, like later on in the show. But I hear you. I think maybe we got into specific stuff later than we should have, and we could have held other stuff for after getting a little bit more deep into that. But, sometimes these conversations make twists and turns based on what comes up. And I'm not one to try to interrupt if someone's on some sort of point and it's making sense, but maybe it just made sense to me. Chokin says, the Tories are completely out of touch. A good example is the reception Theresa May compared to Jeremy Corbyn at Grenfell. Grimm when we were talking about the different literal murders and killings that stemmed from the Iron March group. Grimm says, meanwhile, Antifa murder count, let me see. Oh, still 0. Right. Chokin says, my brother-in-law wrote a book about Elizabeth I being a slave trader, but she is revered here. The book didn't do well. Renee, when we were talking about Siege, so a more serious book than the Turner Diaries. And then Grimm followed up with, I ain't going to Israel. I don't like the fash there either. The Russian Nazis are in Israel already, says Renee. They have drawn swastikas on Israeli city walls some decades ago. Renee also says, check out Genesis P. Oldridge's writing on unrest. Thank you. I agree with Choking on Ashes. Thanks, Renee. I'm going to check that out. We could all use recommendations for books and more information. Grim says, my bet's on someone, talking about Iron March, turning snitch to plea down. Ryan says, of course the dipshit chuds rip off a stoner cartoon. They're all mentally 14. Talking about Weave's Race Ghost podcast title. Ryan Tennant with my favorite comment. I think I saw this when it was live on the show, and I regret forgetting to read it while we were on the first half of the show. When our guest was talking about the secret forum they have now that took over after Iron March, where you need to know all the secret words and answer the questions right to get an invite to it. Ryan says, you have to get 14 of 88 questions right. Grim says, oy vey, Ryan, but too true. Kennedy says, mass shooting fans are fucking terrifying. It is bizarre, right? It is absolutely, really. Over on Twitch, Gulsifer says, hey. Kyle says, I knew DeviantArt was home to lots of furries, but not Nazis. That is something that was really, it's something I knew about. But it's just been one of those things, and I have a habit of doing this. Something I hear about a lot. And it just becomes just like something that I just start thinking of in passing. And I don't even think about doing a show or diving further into it. Because I've just heard it so much as in passing in the background. There is an episode there, a complete story there, on DeviantArt. And I'm going to look into that. And we're going to do one. Misha says, I met one of the founders of DeviantArt at a tech thing in Hawaii. It's maddening the way these people live. They get free vacations, a bunch of free shit for being rich as fuck. Misha says, the only reason I was there is because I knew the founder of another site. And Renee's got to be Renee. And he says, and because you're beautifully alternative. Renee says, just another Russian entitled bastich dreaming of Perun and the Romanovs. Talking about, what's his face? Slavros. Correct and smart leftist human of the left wing. Maybe he just went crypto again under a new name. Talking about Slavros. But Michael laid out why he thinks that's not the case with Slavros. Could be, he said, but I think he laid out why he doesn't think Slavros is one of those new names. Renee says, if they're rich, they made money, talking about Slavros' family. They made monies off the sale of public companies and cheating the Russian people off their shares in the Russian public utilities. Kennedy says, and that's a great point, Renee, the cross-section is mafia, right? Kennedy follows up with, actually, isn't that one dude Putin kept from running for election actually a Nazi? Renee says, except Chechens and the return of the Russian Empire. Being a Nazi should be a capital crime in Russia. Kennedy says, Alexei Navalny. Right, I know who you're talking about. Kennedy also says it should be a capital crime everywhere. Renee says, my country, Chile. Gotta get Carlos Basso and Barrett on. They hate Trump and Gawker for being too beholden to Israel and being a joke. Talking about the alt-right and Iron Watch, right? Grim says maybe Donnie doesn't want to distance himself. That's also talking about Michael waxing about why doesn't Trump just throw the fascist right under the bus like so many others have. It's hard to actually know, to be honest. What's going on through that guy's head? If anything more than just like the bird that dips over and drinks water. You know, the one that Homer uses in The Simpsons to just click on the button. Renee says they find Steve Bannon a useful idiot but unsophisticated, subhuman even. Trump is an old-timey wannabe WASP, dad in the KKK, probably a granddad in the Deutsche Amerikanische Freundschaft We always had the elitist eugenics Euro wannabe element. Renee a little bit on fire today. Not his usual going all over the place. Renee making some great points on today's show. Thank you, Renee. This is the Renee that I hope shows up every week. Renee says about me, I out classical Prussian those neo-Nazis. Calling me dark gritty, says Renee. He also says, El Duce kind of follows Hitler's and Mussolini's style. I think Trump is the closest thing to a low-key Führer for the Schickelgrubers. Is my cat doing something behind? Is my cat being a troublemaker? My cat is being a troublemaker. What is he doing? What is Sabu doing? Come over here. Come over here. My cat better not be scratching this green screen, because then he's in trouble. He's in big trouble. Sabu. Unbelievable. Renee says, as the quote goes, fascism won't come to the U.S. in jackboots, but wrapped in the American flag. Renee says, Spencer might try to go mainstream, maybe join the GOP or start a lobby. I don't think so. I think a lot of those guys, the stench of how far gone they are in terms of being white supremacists and neo-Nazis, I don't think they can make the mainstream play. Kennedy says that I like the dark background. Thank you, Kennedy. Apparently, Ryan Tennant's mind was blown when I turned the chroma key off so he could see the green screen. Here, I'll do it again. Here you go, buddy. Renee says, we noticed the chroma key edges. Screw you, Renee. Screw you. Is it very bad? Is it just like, a light like white halo around outlining my body? Because if that's the case, I don't really have a problem with that so much. Make me look angelic. Misha with the Borat voice. Very nice. Renee, please do send me some backgrounds. Kyle says, maybe my YouTube channel was mass flagged by chuds. It's possible. Kyle says, Vaouche stays up, but the like-dislike ratio is a big piece, I think. So much for the tolerant left. Graham says mass report them back, but the thing is, you don't know who mass reports you on YouTube. Like, they didn't make it known, if that's even the case. Brian, before I made the big announcement at the end of the first half of the show, hey Matt, what are these rumors of you joining a certain Social Security report related podcast? Yeah, and then there was some partying going on when I announced it. Kennedy, yes, Grim with the celebration emoji. Renee says, let's get dark gritty, one of those framed plaques. Misha, hell yes. Dank says, hell yeah. Renee says that he told the serfs in Tovarek. Renee says you got to get on the live stage show too. Well, one thing at a time. A school reunion, right? Dank says, wash the taste of Nazis out of your mouth. And Ryan said what he said earlier. I read it earlier about the Hell World primary being a palate cleanser means it's reason to be concerned. Kennedy with the LMAO at Chrissy Teigen. Yeah, I don't know what that was all about. I'm not going to get into Chrissy Teigen right now. If I ever do. Dank says, LOL, glad I haven't been paying attention to the 2020 Twitter dramas for the last few weeks. I honestly haven't been paying as much attention as I usually have because of the baby. I've been on leave from work. I'm lucky enough to be someone who's given a paternity leave. And I've been spending time with the fam, taking advantage. Once I'm back at work and online 24/7 as I usually am, I'll be back online 24/7 as I usually am. Right now it's like I'm online maybe 22.57. Giving the family a little bit of time. Just a little though. Been spending a lot of time with Ezra actually. My oldest son. Which is nice. He's very good when we go out. He's been having some, it's been a big deal for him, being a big brother at the age of 3.5, almost 4. And there's been times where he's been handling it very well and times where he's having some difficulty. When we're out, he handles it great. I keep him busy, activities, fun times, and he's great. He's wonderful. At home, luckily still with the baby, he's good. He really loves his little sister, and he enjoys being a big brother. But we can definitely tell that he's the stress of some of the changes, which we try to really make sure is not much, but it's inevitable that there are some changes. He does take it out on myself and his mom. And it's understandable. It's difficult, but it's understandable. Even when he's being really bad. I get it. He's a good kid. That Ezra. I'll tell you what though. That movie, Joshua, if you've never seen it, it's one of my favorite horror movies, but it's possibly the legit scariest movie. Right after you've had a second kid. If you haven't seen the movie Joshua, it is a great horror movie. Came out, I think, like late 2000s. Let me look it up because it's really good at a movie. Really good movie. 2007. Please watch the movie Joshua. Fantastic. Also, the name of my oldest brother. The one who's right below the I got 3 younger siblings. He's the one right under me. Dang says, I need a debate to happen before I care about 2020 right now. Renee says, they've already boosted Warren in the debate. Brian says, not looking forward to a Bernie versus Warren standoff. Well, it's going to be a while because Warren's not on the stage with Bernie or Biden or Kamala Harris this next go-around. Misha says, I already have anxiety about election season. Kennedy says, I love primary season. I agree with you, Kennedy. It can get stressful. It can get annoying. I could legitimately get angry sometimes at just the bad faith weaponizing of certain things. But all around, it's fun times. Dank says 2016 broke a lot of people's brains. It sure did, though. Sure did. All right, now here's the part where everyone listen to me make the analogies to Sonic and Knuckles and The Rock and Stone Cold versus the corporate ministry and Daenerys and the Lannisters. And here we go. Thank you with the LMAO. Now Binder speaking my language. Kennedy says, you really got your finger on the pulse, Matt. Misha says, I was always Tails. Renee says, Frodo and the Ents. Kennedy says, it's like Katy Perry and Taylor Swift hugging at the end of Taylor's new video. Grim says, it's like there's a reason to post-modernity tried to kill metaphors. Renee says, Vampiro vs. Sting. Dank says, it would be like Harry Potter and Cornelius Fudge teaming up to take down Voldemort. No idea who Cornelius Fudge is. Dank says, yes, it makes sense. Renee says, oh, Snape and Harry. Dank says, either way. Kennedy, it would be like the outtake from the Left movie where Draco ran toward Harry after he realizes he isn't dead. Last movie, said Kennedy, not Left movie. Although, Misha making fun of me for calling Voldemort he who is what's-his-face. Going, yes, he who is what's-his-face. Kennedy says, I'm on the Harry Potter beat. And Champagne Kami says, very disappointed to find out you're not a Potterhead, Binder. A very overrated series. A very overrated fandom. I'm sorry. Just could not be more overrated. I thought the first book was good, but it's not like legendary like some of the other fandoms are. Like, it's just a good book. It's like throw it in there with literally on the same level of, I don't know, Ender's Game or some shit like that. That's my opinion of it. Dank says, I still need to watch Deadwood. M-Raid in the Twitch stream. Hello, at Matt Binder. Yarak. Whatever that means. But hello, Myra. Mr. Rad or Mraid. Thanks for watching on Twitch. Renee says, I prefer Doctor Who. There was a time I watched Doctor Who, and then it just got to be too much, and I fell out of it. Not the storyline, just like too many episodes to catch up on. Kennedy says, excuse me. Sorry, I had to clear my throat, so I put myself on mute here. Kennedy says, I never watched Doctor Who, but I love making fun of it. Renee says, Morrissey having Mexican gang members as fans? As an analogy. Grim says, I got to get through to Sam this Tuesday, so tell him how much you enjoy my presence. Champagne Kami says, maybe I need to check out this Deadwood thing. It's very good. Francis Zek says, fuck yes, Binder time. What did I miss? Oh, you tuned in a little bit late, Francis Zek? Well, it was a great show, I thought. Misha says, I couldn't finish the first season of Deadwood. It was so boring, but I don't like Westerns, so... Listen, Misha. I actually felt the same way about the first season or two of Game of Thrones. I couldn't get into the medieval times era. I know it's not medieval times era, it's all fantasy. But the medieval times influenced stuff. Because I'm not a big fan of that sort of stuff. In terms of, like, TV shows and the like. But you got to stick through the good shows, regardless of what era they set themselves in, because they're good shows. And Deadwood has been really great. A couple episodes into the second season, and I'm enjoying it a lot. First season was really good, I thought. Renee says, gotta get on the MR dressed up as a bandit cowpoke. I will show up. I will not, but I'll tell you I will. Renee says, but Ian McShane, amor, Misha, says Renee. Yeah. Listen. Deadwood is great. So far. Really have enjoyed Deadwood. And the character of Al Swearingen is fantastic. A great job done there. Brian says, any thoughts on the Iran escalation? I wish we don't. Should probably do more than a quick couple minutes on that one. But I think it's going to be mostly talk so far. I do think so. I mean, so far, obviously, it's been mostly talk. What I should say is I think it's only going to be the talk. I hope so, at the very least. I don't know if... I still don't think we're at the place where people would go for it. I mean, Americans are terrible at learning from history, but Iraq and Afghanistan ain't history. We're still there. So I think it's definitely something people are like not gonna just sort of roll with like they did with Iraq and Afghanistan. Hopefully I'm right. Please hope I'm not wrong. Kenny says, yeah, Jimmy Dore interviewed Faraday Speaks. Misha says, maybe she'll give Deadwood another chance someday. Francis X says, Jimmy Dore deplatformed Sam. He's a hater. Grim says, thing is, Dimbo has been making those edits for years. And yes, he edited out Sam's name. Renee says, yeah, now David Packman is egging Doorgate on. Grim says, I gave up on American Gods when they called Roma gypsies. Well, it's a show. I mean, if it's accurate portrayal of the character, like, listen, if there's a show and the character is supposed to be a racist and he says the N-word, I mean, you could not watch because maybe you don't like that. That's fair, but I mean, it's not the equivalent as like the actor in real life saying the N-word or anyone in real life saying the N-word. The character says the N-word because you're supposed to not like the character. I mean, assuming that's... I'm not familiar with American Gods, but it's got to be... If that's not the case there, then... Renee says, I think it's Rogan being coy about Crowder's homophobia. Or Rogan being against looking up undocumented immigrants and refugees as well as splitting up families. Ryan says, sigh, 98 minutes until I could start drinking. It's going to be a long 98 minutes. What do you do? Are you at work, Ryan? Francis Zek says, when will Alan and Matt fight for the Binder Dad IM name? I'm cool with not being labeled Dad as like my identifier. Hell, my son, Ezra. He calls me Matt a lot of the times. I think because listen, I call his mom in front of him, I call her mommy. So he knows that. But she, however, doesn't call me daddy in front of him. She calls me Matt. No matter how many times I say, call me daddy in front of him so he knows to call me daddy too. But I don't have a problem with him calling me Matt. My mom always tries to correct him, and I'm like, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter to me. She thinks it's wrong for him to call me Matt and not daddy or dad. Truthfully, it doesn't bother me. Really doesn't. I'm fine either way. It's fine. It's fine. It's Let's go back to the chat here. I accidentally X'd out of it. Okay. Dank says, LMAO, the backhanded compliment. What did I do? Renee says, nice German, Matt. What did I say? Oh, was it when I read your... Oh, yeah, I'm bad. Dank says, get on screen, Sabu. Right. This is when Sabu was bothering the green screen. Green screen. Kennedy says, kiddy. And so does Misha. Also says, kiddy. Renee says, is Sabu okay with the baby? Yeah, Sabu's been very good with the baby. At night, when we're sleeping, we don't let him in the room yet. Because of those stories of cats jumping in and wanting to be warm with the baby. So they lay on the baby. And that's not really something you can control when you're sleeping. So he's not in the bedroom yet with her. At least until, she's able to roll over or push him off. But he's really good with her. In fact, he likes to play rough with my son Ezra, because Ezra plays rough with him, and it's 100% play. You can tell by how he acts and how they act, and he doesn't even attempt that stuff with the baby, because I think he can tell and he knows. Kennedy says, my cat didn't sleep with me last night, so I was awoken by him screaming bloody murder at my bedroom door to be let in. Yeah, he doesn't do that, but in the morning he'll cry at the door. He's fine with us leaving him out there while he's sleeping and we're sleeping. But when he hears us wake up, that's when he wants to come in. He's bothering the green screen again, this cat, I think. Let's see. No, he's fine. He's going in the baby stroller. Dank says it really varies from halo to noticeable depending on when you move. Talking about the green screen. I'm still experimenting with the lighting. I'm glad it works though. And I'm fairly well lit, it seems like. Just gotta fix the lighting on the screen, the green screen. Renee says, gotta play the Reigns of Castamere clip during the debate's key moments. Kenny says, I grew up with Harry Potter, so I'll always stan. Brian says, go off, Binder. Is this about, Harry Potter? Kenny says, I saw the first movie at a midnight premiere in the first grade. What? What? Kenny, you're making me feel old. I'm pretty sure the first movie came out when I was in high school. How old are you, Kennedy? Are you 17, 18? How old? What is going on? How old am I? Jeez. Dank says, yeah, I never could finish the first season of Deadwood either, which is why I haven't watched it at all. What? The first season was fantastic. What are you talking about? Dank says, but that was also like a decade ago when I first tried to watch it. All right, well, you know what? If I tried to watch Deadwood a decade ago, I probably wouldn't have been into it too. You know what? I really was never a TV person. I really did not like TV. I did not like how network television looked. I didn't like how it felt. I didn't like how it was. It just... And I think that's why a lot of people, in the industry even felt like, movies were prestige, TV was sort of looked down upon. But that's changed. And now I feel like I'd rather a really good, high quality, prestige TV show than a movie, to be honest with you. I remember when that first season of Daredevil first came out on Netflix, and I was like, this is better than any of the Marvel movies because we now have spent more time with Daredevil than we have with any of the characters in the Marvel movie. We know those characters better in the Daredevil show. At least the first season. I didn't think the second season of Daredevil was so good. In fact, I never finished watching it. But a good TV show nowadays, like a high quality, well produced TV show, better than any movie. Dang says, I like the first season of Westworld, and that was kind of westerny. Well, a little bit different. There's a addendum there. Dang says, couldn't finish the second though. Kenny says, I never heard of Deadwood. What is that? What? Listen, if the Deadwood movie didn't just come out on HBO this, like, last month or last few weeks, then I could say it's not that crazy you haven't heard of a canceled HBO show that went 3 seasons about 10 years ago. But come on, Kennedy. Actually, more than 10 years ago. Jeez, 15 years ago. Dakota says, just getting off work and tuning in. Looking forward to listening to the first half. I hope you enjoy it, Dakota, and thank you for tuning in, even though it's late. I get it. Hope work was good. Hope work was good. Dang says, it used to be held up there, talking about Deadwood, it used to be held up there with The Wire and Sopranos back in the day. Dakota says, green screen looking sharp as fuck. Nice, thank you. Renee says, maybe interview the Humans of New York guy. I think he's Iranian Persian. Oh no, Misha, not feeling so great and heading out. Misha, feel better. Ryan watching the show from work. Love it. Hope you're not doing hope you're not doing anything too important in watching the show. Like, I hope you're not like guarding the nuclear code or something, Ryan. Ryan says, sticking it to the man by streaming this glorious stream as payback for the exploitation of my labor. Dang says, I saw Harry Potter in the 4th grade, I think. Harry Potter came out like 18 years ago. Yeah, I'm old. Kennedy's 23. Okay, well, I'm a decade older than you. So, I guess that makes sense. Right. It would make sense. Probably freshman, sophomore in high school, and you're in 1st grade. 10 years. Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. Grim, talking about American gods again. They claimed Romania would go to an Egyptian afterlife. Renee says, there are gypsies in Egypt, although originally Rajasthan. Excuse me if I did not say that correctly. No idea if Renee is telling the truth or has any sort of expertise in that matter. Grim says, just watch JoJo's Bizarre Adventure already. What's that? JoJo's... I'll have to check that out. And the final comments of the episode. Renee says, there should have been a Kingpin standalone. And Ryan says, I'm a brain surgeon at his job where he's streaming the show. Uh-oh. Oh, wait, no, Ryan chimes in again. No, I'm a nuclear power plant operator. You should watch Chernobyl then, Ryan, while you're at work. And Renee says, I'm 47. I'm a lich doomhead. Are you really 47, Renee? You, when I've seen you on stream, you look a lot younger, if that's true. Anyway, folks, thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the first half. Hope you enjoyed the second half. You're definitely gonna hear from me soon about on the show or whatever. I'm gonna post. I know I mentioned Telegram and Facebook groups. I'm gonna post the link to one of them in Discord and on Patreon for you guys, and we're gonna get that going. And don't forget, Majority Report next Friday. I will be on the show. Ryan says Chernobyl is inspirational as a nuclear power plant operator. Wonderful. Folks, see you all next time on Doomed. Goodbye. Have a good night.